ain't stop. Fuck around, make my 40 pop.
Alright guys, Boruto episode 213, spoilers. This right here is a little bit late, but regardless, we're going to get into the spoilers. Some of you guys were actually asking for it, so I'm going to give you guys exactly what we should be expecting in the next episode of the Boruto anime. Now, first things first, we do have to understand that chapter 46 is supposed to be adapted into this episode, episode 213 of the Boruto anime, but chapter 45 was not fully adapted. Now, there is a tiny possibility that they just completely scrap the rest of chapter 45 and don't actually add that into the Boruto anime. I personally believe it's going to be a small possibility, so I'm going to go over exactly what they did skip from chapter 45. And it's going to be some very small things, very important things, but very small things. But regardless, first things first is that Amado explains what Otsutsuki are and what they do and why they do it. So essentially, Amado basically called Otsutsuki members alien parasites. They come to Earth to actually plant a god tree using the tentails. After they plant the god tree, a chakra fruit then appears, and then they eat the chakra fruit, and that's how they actually upgrade themselves as a whole species. So that's exactly what Otsutsuki members are trying to do in this particular situation right here. During his explanation about the Otsutsuki clan, he actually did reveal that he left back some information for Sasuke to find so he can then go into the other dimension. I talked about this in my previous spoilers, which I kind of thought that we were going to get in the anime, but it didn't necessarily come through. But he basically left the coordinates to that other dimension that we did see a bunch of the other Otsutsuki holograms along with the tentails. But besides that, Amado actually explained that Jigen himself is not actually the person trying to do all of this, actually plant the god tree and eat the chakra fruit. Well, essentially, Naruto suggested that it was going to be Jigen this time. Sasuke interrupted and said, no, it's not Jigen, it's the person who gave Jigen the Karma seal, and then Amado agrees. At that particular point, the information ends. They didn't necessarily talk about Isshiki Otsutsuki. Isshiki Otsutsuki comes in chapter 46, which happily we will actually be getting in this specific episode right here. Now, chapter 46 is where everything really starts, everything really kicks off. The heavy information, the heavy fighting scenes versus Isshiki Otsutsuki, or excuse me, Jigen and Kashin Koji. It basically starts with Jigen and Kashin Koji again sizing up with each other, but in that scene it does flip back to Naruto and Amado actually talking about exactly what's going on. You see Naruto asking Amado why are they fighting since they're both part of the Kata organization. Amado then reiterates that they're not actually part of the Kata organization, or Kashin Koji is not actually part of the Kata organization. They're playing at being a part of the Kata organization so they can actually take down Jigen. He then goes on to explain that Jigen fighting against Naruto and Sasuke made Jigen extremely weak, and this right here gives them a very clear advantage to actually beat Jigen. But right after that, Kashin Koji and Jigen start to go at it. At this particular point, Jigen is not really using his Karma Seal. In my personal opinion, I think he's reluctant because he's extremely weak, and of course the Karma Seal would just waste a lot more of the chakra that he already has. At this particular time, it looks like Kashin Koji and Jigen, they're kind of matched, and I'm not even gonna lie, it seems that Kashin Koji may even have an upper hand. The thing about Kashin Koji at this particular time is that he's still kind of feeling out exactly what Jigen's Karma Seal actually capable of. Both of them used a bunch of their abilities, and it was made extremely clear that Kashin Koji loves shadow clones. But regardless, I think one of the biggest parts about this specific scene right here is the fact that Naruto looked at Kashin Koji's fighting style, and he said the way that the masked man fights, it's like, and he didn't actually finish that phrase. Now obviously during this particular time, it's pretty much damn near common knowledge that Kashin Koji fights a lot like Jiraiya, and Naruto's actually starting to see this. In the Boruto anime, they might actually expand this scene right here and have Naruto actually say he fights like Jiraiya, which would be absolutely amazing. But regardless, after that volley right there, they do start to have some sort of conversations. Jigen says, "You're serious? You're about to die?" Kashin Koji says, "That's my line, Lord Jigen," or rather Otsutsuki Isshiki. Now at this particular time, that's the first time Isshiki Otsutsuki is actually going to be named. The scene shifts directly back to Amado and Naruto talking about Isshiki Otsutsuki, and then Amado actually confirms that that right there is Jigen's true identity, and actually explains where Isshiki Otsutsuki actually came from. He says that Isshiki Otsutsuki came to Earth alongside Kaguya Otsutsuki. He says their main objective was to actually plant the divine tree and then eat its chakra fruit, but a problem arose. Kaguya Otsutsuki suddenly turned against Isshiki Otsutsuki. She caught Isshiki Otsutsuki off guard and somehow managed to damage Isshiki Otsutsuki enough to where he was actually on the verge of death. But right before Isshiki Otsutsuki died, he managed to take over the body of a novice monk who happened to be nearby, and that novice monk is actually Jigen. Sasuke then asked the question if Otsutsuki members use the Karma Seal to actually take over others' body. Amado refuses to answer that. He then asks Naruto, "Are you going to give me the asylum?" Eventually Naruto agrees. What was a surprise to me is that Shikamaru also agreed with the terms as well, but then he goes on to explain exactly what the Karma Seal actually is. He uses Boruto and Momoshiki's situation to actually explain this conversation right here. He says during the battle with Isshiki Otsutsuki, Momoshiki converted himself into data, essentially a replication of himself, and implanted that into Boruto's body. He then simplified it by saying, in short, the Karma Seal is a highly compressed Otsutsuki backup file, and over time it slowly extracts, and that process is going on this very minute, and when all of the data is fully extracted, Boruto's body will be overwritten by Momoshiki's data, and Boruto himself will completely cease to exist. Now, at this particular time, there are two very good graphics. It's Boruto with his Karma Seal, which you already seen spoiler images about that, and also we see Boruto's body with Momoshiki's head on it, which is absolutely insane. When this actually gets animated, it's going to be very hilarious, but regardless, everybody else is actually reacting to this. Everybody's like, what the hell is going on? Naruto asks, is there a way to actually block this process? Amado says no, they don't necessarily know a way to block that process. Sasuke then asks, when Momoshiki is reborn into Boruto's body, what happens to the Karma Seal? Amado said it completely disappears. Then Sasuke asks, why hasn't the Karma Seal disappeared on Jigen's body if Isshiki Otsutsuki actually did take over his body? Amado then goes on to explain that Isshiki did take over Jigen's body, but he didn't necessarily take over Jigen's body by the use of the Karma Seal. He elaborates by saying that Isshiki Otsutsuki was on the verge of death. He shrunk himself to an extremely small size, snuck into Jigen's ear, and actually slowly took over Jigen's brain function. The reason why he did this because at that particular point he was too weak to actually leave back a Karma Seal, so he housed himself inside of Jigen until he was strong enough to actually leave back a Karma Seal, and then that's what he did. The scene then shifts back to Kashin Koji versus Jigen. At this particular point, Jigen is actually going all out. Now he goes into the second stage of the Karma Seal, then goes to attack Kashin Koji. He completely speed blitzes Kashin Koji. At this particular time, it's very clear that Jigen is on a completely different level than Kashin Koji, but Kashin Koji still has some tricks up his sleeve. He summons a swamp, a dark swamp, and it basically surrounds Jigen. Jigen is actually kind of sinking into the dark swamp. The scene then shifts back to Naruto and Amado. Naruto asks Amado, if Jigen has the Karma Seal, why doesn't Isshiki Otsutsuki just hurry up and revive? Amado then goes on to explain that Isshiki Otsutsuki needs a worthy vessel to actually revive. Jigen himself is not necessarily a worthy vessel, and if he would actually revive into Jigen, he'd be dead within a few days, and obviously because of that he was looking for a brand new vessel. Naruto puts two and two together and basically says, so this new vessel is Kawaki, isn't it? Before Amado answers that question, the scene shifts back to Jigen versus Kashin Koji. At this particular time, Jigen actually jumps up from the dark swamp. Before he popped up, he asks Kashin Koji, do you think a stupid trick like this can actually hold me? After Jigen jumped out, Kashin Koji says, oh no, not at all, and then he cleared the dark swamp to reveal an extremely large, huge summoning marks, and out of nowhere Kashin Koji summons a bunch of flames. At this particular time, Jigen isn't necessarily able to actually absorb these flames because these flames actually comes from natural fires. The scene then shifts back to Amado and Naruto. Amado is telling Naruto yo, we cannot let Isshiki Otsutsuki revive into the body of Kawaki, because if that's the case, it'll be impossible to kill Isshiki Otsutsuki. He says, I'll teach you all how to kill an Otsutsuki member, and the chapter ends with Jigen just inside of the flames looking like he has nowhere to go. Needless to say, this episode is going to be absolutely amazing. I do want to know which event you guys are most anticipating. Me personally, it has to be the part where we see Momoshiki's head on Boruto's body, but again, there is just so much very good and exciting moments in this specific episode. But it's been your boy Baara B, and we out.
It's a knife.